A nearly $10 million project to replace bridges in Richland Parish is causing more road closures. Sophia Ridley is here with all the details. Sophia?
That's right, Jennifer. Horse Bayou Bridge is the latest bridge being replaced along Louisiana 132 near Mangum. According to the DOTD, the larger project began last year and a total of 5 bridges are being replaced. The funds come from the On-System Bridge program, which uses 80% of federal funds and 20% state funds. The closures mean travelers will need to take a detour using LA 135, LA 15, and US 425.
We have all across the state, especially, and again, in our rural areas, are bridges that were built many years ago, and usually were built timber, wood. And so a lot of them have reached the end of their useful service life. They're to a point now where they need to be modernized and replaced with material that will, serve the community for much longer.
The entire project is expected to be finished sometime in 2026. Jennifer?